Upon being asked by Rabbi Berg to personally reflect on Zichronot, the portion of the Rosh Hashanah Musaf benediction that beseeches God to remember our earthly works and those of our ancestors in the best possible light that we may be judged mercifully in these days of awe, I immediately feared our rabbi had erred badly. For one thing, much of my output is that of a professional pessimist. I do not as a rule merely see society's glass as half empty of hope. Rather, I see that glass as half full of distortions, delusions, and outright dishonesties sufficient to merit a 6-part miniseries. Asking me to assess the plausibility of arguing with an omniscient deity about looking on the bright side of life is just asking for trouble. But beyond my natural inclination towards doom-scrolling and cynicism, I have to confess to another problem. For a long time now, I have struggled to incorporate the idea of an interventionist God who metes out rewards and punishments as a cohesive response to the good and evil in the world. My personal God, if she exists at all, is not an interventionist. Given the sad state of the world, I limit that God to the Aristotelian unmoved mover, the creator who has set our remarkable world in motion and now rests his judgments and delivers us, his creations, to our most godlike attribute of free will. My God has stepped back from human glory and human folly. He's left us in charge, and we are obliged to do what we can with the circumstance. Well, in this Rosh Hashanah, I would never ask the rest of our Beth Am congregation to follow me on this journey away from the Old Testament God of the covenant. In these times, every one of us is entitled to find purchase where we must, to cling to what rocks hold us. I am certainly as unimpressed by my own faithlessness as I am incapable of the cleaner faith of my Hebrew ancestors. Yet here I am, barely believing the entire notion of a God of justice and remembrance, much less in the precision of a deity who records all of our sins and meets vote, but tallies neither with an eye towards the justice we deserve, but rather in light of the mercy we crave. I wish it were so, and I wish I could believe it were so. Instead, I'm left with the task of emphasizing Zichronot not as an appellate exercise to a creator sitting on high to render judgments and deliver human futures in response to petitional pleas, but rather in light of our collective remembrance of our own ancestors, of those who came before us to establish the great humanistic premises of modern Judaism, and by extension the collective remembrance of those generations who, despite our flaws and corruptions and shortcomings, came before us as Americans to establish at least the ideals that once made us the world's last and best hope for moral self-governance. Because I have to admit that at the end of the day, it's a process of ancestor worship and societal engagement and, well, basic civics that holds me to the rituals of being a Beth Am congregant. The ethical accomplishments of the Hebrews, and again by extension, the moral ambitions of the American experiment, are what secures my allegiance and identity. Who we are and who we claim we want to be is as close to a Godhead as I can manage. In 2 months, an election is going to take place. Who you vote for and why you do, or whether you participate at all, is a personal decision, and no one speaking within earshot of any honest pulpit ought to be telling anyone else how to array yourself politically. But that said, I would like to take the opportunity of Rabbi Berg's error in judgment and do what comes naturally. I'd like to hijack these reflections on Zichronot, not to reflect on an omniscient God judging us and remembering our best deeds and those of our ancestors, but rather on the notion that we might imagine the generations of Jews and Americans who came before us as those sitting on high in judgment of what we will do in the coming year. American history is by no means clean of greed or fear-mongering or human betrayal, nor is Jewish history, ancient or modern, ripe for a simplistic whitewashing. Everything that is tribal is susceptible to the worst kind of racial or theological hegemonies and excesses. But I am still proudly American because of what we claim as our national ambition and intent, and because the arc of the nation's history does indeed bend towards an expanding sense of justice and inclusion. I can't read the speeches of Lincoln or Roosevelt, or the essaying of Paine or Douglas or I.F. Stone without counting myself proudly in the collective. And regardless of the current vagaries of, say, settlement policy and representative government in any current Mideast state, I am still proudly Jewish because of the idealized morality of Isaiah, or the grievous laments, if you will, of the Jeremiads, of the later prophets. They still argue for inclusion and mercy and collective responsibility as almost nothing else in ancient history. They argue for the best that human beings can be and for what we mean to each other in a society. We've been better than this in the past, and we're better than this now, actually. And if we seek the best remembrance and mercy of those who came before us as Americans and Jews, I believe we'll be better than this again. I do believe that. Considering how admittedly hard it is for me to believe in unseen things, this may sound a little bit incredulous to some of you. But I do believe it. Happy Rosh Hashanah.